Okay, so we were talking about the perspectives of psychology in yesterday's class. Schools of thoughts were completed, and one of the great problem with the students of graduation is that after completing their graduation, even after in their masters, they don't know exactly about the difference between the perspectives of psychology and schools of thoughts. So, so here I am clearing your doubt very clearly. Just listen to it carefully. Number one is, what are schools of thoughts? They are predecessors of all the perspectives of psychology. Some of the perspectives are there which were the schools of thoughts. For example, we see psychodynamic perspective, behavioral perspective. These were the schools of thoughts which we have already discussed. So why we are studying here in perspectives? The reason is they are still dominating in today's life when we are studying about the perspectives of psychology in modern era. There are many psychologists who are still practicing with the psychodynamic perspective, such as free association and psychodynamic therapy, and behavioral therapy is still in prevalence, and it is one of the most important perspective after cognitive perspective. So here this difference would be noted very clearly, that psychodynamic perspective and behavioral perspective are also the schools of thoughts. Don't be confused, get confused with this. Schools of thoughts just remind us about the subject matter of psychology. Still they are psychodynamic perspective and behavioral perspective are still the subject matter of psychology. But when we talk about structuralism and functionalism, they are no more the subject matter of psychology. Some of the contents of functionalism and structuralism are still there, which we read, but they are read under the cognitive perspective or behavioral perspective, or they may be read under humanistic perspective also, but they are no longer being practiced as a sole perspective. Coming to the psychodynamic dynamic perspective, we had already learned something about psychodynamic school of thought. Here I am telling in somehow slightly in more detail. Moving forward, when we'll move forward, we will get to know more deeply about psychodynamic perspective. So first thing is, Sigmund Freud was the proponent of psychodynamic perspective, and in this perspective, we talk about the conscious uh, contents hidden in our unconscious mind. It has been evolved so many times that it has been changed from its original perspective. Right now, we don't study about psychodynamic perspective. We study about neo psychodynamic perspective. So, what neo psychodynamic perspective says? It says that human mind can be divided into three parts. One is, suppose this is human mind. Then the upper part, its upper part will be our conscious mind. Conscious mind is that part of mind which deals with with our awareness, meaning everything about which we are aware of right now. When we are talking right now, I'm talking, you are listening, so we are conscious about this time. So this will be covered under the under conscious mind. And second one is subconscious mind. Our memory can be put into the subconscious mind. All the things which we remember or which we can recall during the time of requirement will come under the subconscious mind. And third one is deep hidden unconscious mind. What does this unconscious mind contains? The I had answered this, that our unfulfilled desires, unfulfilled dreams, our anger, our emotions which we don't want to remember, or which we want to forget. Can this unconscious mind affect our conscious state? Answer is direct. If you talk about the can unconscious mind affect conscious mind directly, this is not possible. It affects our life, but in our unconscious state, life when we are watching dreams or seeing dreams, then all the dreams which we see, that is the product of this unconscious mind. All those things are there was a movie in south, and in that movie it was shown that our dreams are our feelings which are hidden in our deep driven unconscious mind. So that was not uh, only that was one part of our dreams. Dream theory will be explained later in, I think, in this book, but I don't think that this book will cover all those parts of the dreams. If I will have time, I will discuss about the dream theory later on after completing this book. So this was all about psychoanalysis. There are so many things in psychoanalysis which we'll cover later when we will be dealing with the psychodynamics. Right now, in the perspective, we will cover only this portion. Next one is behavioral perspective. As stated earlier, behavioral perspective doesn't focus on the unmeasurable part of our life. It simply says that we cannot measure what is going on in our mind. So it excludes the subject matter of mind related things from its perspective, and it deals only with the externally observable actions and reactions. Like we know the definition of psychology it's a scientific study of behaviors and cognitive processes. So here everything which we deal under the behaviors comes under the behavioral perspective. There is its proponent was Watson, John D. Watson, and right now, if we say that it was modified and molded in this scenario, uh, molded like today with the help of a renowned person known as B.F. Skinner. We can say he is the leader of behavioral perspective right now. There are two things in behavioral perspective. One is classical conditioning and second is operant conditioning. About classical and operant conditioning, classical conditioning was modified by B.F. Skinner, and B.F. Skinner also developed operant conditioning, about which we will discuss further when we'll come to the behavioral psychology later on in this book. But here you have to focus only on the sentence that we study only about externally observable actions and reactions of our body in behavioral perspective. There are many things, many theories. One of the basic theory of behavioral perspective says that you will repeat only those things you will repeat only those behaviors whose outcome is better for you, is pleasant for you. It may be better, may not be better, but is pleasant for you. If you have done any behavior, you have done any action, and its outcome is not pleasurable to you, you will not repeat that behavior again. This is a very simple theory, basic theory of behavioral perspective, but we can easily understand that I mean, we can say that what's surprising in this theory, or what there is nothing like gyan in this theory. But this theory has built so many practicals and so many changes in the behavior of mainly animals. And this theory is one of the very important theory of behavioral perspective and basic theory of behavioral perspective, which is taught when very earlier in the psychology. Next one is humanistic psychology. Who is associated with this? Let me see it. Abraham Maslow. Okay, there is a psychologist in approximately 1908 to 1970, and Carl Rogers was also in the same time span, who were trying to put psychology in a humanistic approach. Perspective may be also regarded as approaches. So, in this theory, they deal with the attainment of self-actualization. Means you are full, you have obtained the fullness, and you don't need anyone, anything else from this life again. Now that's the known as self-actualization. We will study further more about self-actualization, but right now we have to understand that Abraham Maslow had given a hierarchy of 7 steps of human life, and those 7 steps were the basis of humanistic perspective. Actually, this I don't remember all the 7 steps, but it will come further. I will explain what it actually deals with. Maslow says that first every human wants his basic needs. Means basic needs will be fulfilled earliest. Basic needs, then maybe physical needs. No, it was not physical needs. Basic, and then it was security related need, and then needs which are related to our body or any other thing. Total 7 steps were given in Abraham Maslow's need hierarchy. It was known as need hierarchy, and at the last step, it was self-actualization, which is the goal of every human to attain. That is what humanistic perspective says. But in these 7 steps, that's not the full knowledge of about humanistic perspective. Those 7 steps has every step has some problems, and every step has some merits and demerits also. But without fulfilling one step, you cannot go to higher step. That's what humanistic perspective says. And if there is a problem in your in any step, it will restrict you from attaining self actualization. That's what humanistic psychology says. One of the important thing which I missed in psychodynamic perspective was it was focusing more on sexual development rather than physical or emotional development or mental development. That's why that's also a demerit of psychodynamic perspective. And here comes cognitive perspective. We know the definition of psychology. It's a scientific study of human behavior and cognitive processes. The word cognitive comes from here. Cognitive means how people think. We started focusing on the thinking, on the working of our mind. Not only our mind, but also how our brain works. Remember, there's a difference between brain and mind, and you may know that brain is visible and it's a physical thing, whereas mind is virtual and it cannot be seen. So it focuses both on mind and brain, and especially a special focus is how people think. And how that is measured, that is not measured directly, that is measured with first one is introvert, like William Wundt used to measure, and there are some other statistical methods in which we do some practicals, like we choose two groups, and we give them two medicines. One was actual medicine, and second one was not a medicine, it was a placebo. So by checking the difference between both the groups, we come to a conclusion that how this medicine has worked. This is how our mind works and how we measure the working of our mind. Not only these are not only the methods, there are some other methods which we will discuss later in this chapter, I think, in our next class. But how we measure the cognitive processes will also be discussed in statistics of your syllabus. I will not cover your statistics as of now, but if I will get time after completing this book, then it will be possible. Then maybe it is possible to cover statistics, because one of the major problem for students of arts is that their statistics becomes weak, and that's why the students of art don't perform well in psychology. Psychology also focuses on cognitive neuroscience, which were one of the important thing in psychodynamic perspective. You should link every perspective to another perspective. We cannot draw any line that psychodynamic perspective ends here and behavioral perspective starts here. Things are overlapped, subject matter is overlapped, and that's why we have covered we have a good syllabus of uh, we have very short syllabus for psychology. It's not very big syllabus right now, it's in developing phase. Next one is socio-cultural perspective, not so important, but in modern psychology we focus on socio-cultural perspective also. Cultural means our culture also diverts our behavior and influences our behavior and our social status, right? Like if we are with our family, our behavior will be different from when we are with our friends or when we are alone. Our behavior gets changed due to these social events also. That this is what about which sociocultural perspective talks. It's in developing phase and not much more theories have been given in it, but many psychologists such as John Darley and John B. Blatane has found the presence of others, that presence of others always influences human behavior. It's important to note, and it may be one of the major perspective of psychology after cognitive psychology in future. But right now, cognitive is the one which everyone has to study. Another one is a biopsychological perspective. It is majorly, we can say it's a derivative of cognitive perspective. Here we focus majorly on the biological perspective and also physical perspective of psychology. We know that I haven't told it, but we know, I have assumed that you know that psychology is a combination of philosophy and physiology. So in psychological perspective, we deal with both biology, physiology, and not much more about cognitive perspective or behavioral perspective. We talk about hormones, we talk about neuroscience and everything. Like hormones, heredity, brain, chemicals, tumors, etc., etc. Uh, there are some issues in which had uh, issues in psychology which are fundamental in nature. Ciccarally has not talked about it, but Byron has talked about it. Let's get to know about those fundamental problems which current psychologists are dealing with. Number one is nature versus nurture. Some psychologists say that human behavior is fully influenced by by heredity, and some say that no, it cannot be fully influenced by heredity. Of course, it is not. And nurture. Nurture means environment here, and nature means your heredity. So our behavior is determined by what? By our heredity or by our environment? This is a question which seems that 50% of our behavior is influenced by our heredity and 50% is by environment. It may fluctuate 5% plus 5% minus. Major psychologists agree with this theory, but there is a problem. Let's say this is a there is a particular behavior of a person. That particular behavior is related to heredity or his environment. uh, Getting that to know about from what it is related, that's a problem in psychology. Nature versus nurture. This problem is fundamental of this is a fundamental problem of psychology which is given in the book of written by Robert C. Barron, but not in Ciccarally. Ciccarally has talked about it, but later in mm, later chapters of this book, not in the starting. But Barron has talked about it in his starting. So there are two more problems with psychology. Let's open the Baron. Second one is I talked about nature and nurture. This is a book written by Robert C. Barron. So I have told about nature and nurture issue. And second one is stability versus change. To what extent do we remain stable, and to what extent do we change? The problem is that some of the traits of human and some or we can say some of the behaviors of human being are stable over time. Not always, but if we see a long span of if we take a long span of our life, then we can imagine that some of our behaviors have not been changed from starting to till now, and those may be regarded as our stable feature, and some are subject to change. But the problem with the psychology is that this stability is not is this stability is unique. There is a behavior which may be stable for a person, and the same behavior may be unstable for a person. It will be subject to change. So that's also a problem. And third one here is rationality versus irrationality. Sometimes the behavior of humans are influenced by emotion and sometimes by logic. When logic will work and when emotions will work, that's also an issue. This is a third issue with psychology, that in many cases here it's written, in many cases we are not completely rational. We know very well that the psychological response or reaction, whatever what the logical response or reaction would be, but our reason is overridden by our emotions. This happens extremely when we are attached this happens often when we are attached to someone extremely close, like it may be our mom, it may be our father, it may be our law, anyone else that may be, due to which at these type of relationship we know what should we do, or what our logical response would be, but we are emotionally attached, so we don't take any action against them, or we should not take again any action against them. We know I know I'm not saying that, but what should we do logically is different from what we did emotionally. That's also a problem in psychology. These three are fundamental problems which right now psychologists are dealing with. We have read about behavioral perspective, cognitive, biological means it's fully related to biology. We don't include any psychological or social or philosophical content in biological perspective. Means we fully study the biology of human being, especially our hormones and our glands, because they influence the behavior of human being. Socioculture, we have studied psychodynamic and evolutionary perspective is also there, which deals with the evolution of human being, especially it is influenced by Darwin's theory of adaptation. And it says that whatever we are right now, we have got it from our ancestors. You can write these points to increase the points number of points in your exams, not marks. Another thing, after we have read about perspective, another thing is, so what are the subfield of psychology? Subfield of psychology means whatever we deal in perspective is the subject matter of perspective. But what are the specializations in psychology? Some are clinical psychologists, some are counselors we see, and there are also developmental psychologists, education psychologists, and experimental psychologists also. You may heard about these type of subfields or specializations. I'm not going in detail with this in detail. You can take the screenshot of this page, and you may study it. Everything is given in here. Description is also given, and what up to what percentage the psychologists are there in clinical counselors development, etc. is also given. You can take the screenshot and read yourself. The next thing which we will in the next class we will deal about the scientific methods which we use to measure the events in measure our behavior or cognitive processes. These methods are very important to study, as when you are going to do any practical, that will make your practicals much easy. It will make you get good marks, and also easy understanding of your statistics and your practicals. And also it's good to know about it, because in future when we are going second year, third year, or in masters, that will influence that will be influenced by this basic knowledge. So that's it for today.